So I got paid to buy a rental. What? So let's go through this deep dive and show you how you could do the same. I bought this property in Charlotte, North Carolina. I started targeting this market about mid 2022 when I went down there for a vacation. I have a goal of running a race in every state, so knocked out Charlotte, North Carolina, went on a little hang gliding trip, and kind of fell in love with Charlotte. I really did like the area down there. So naturally, I'm looking at how can I make money down in Charlotte. So for the next 6 months, mid 2022 until the end of the year, I started building out my team down there, connecting with people, starting to really research the housing market. The more and more I dug, the more and more I found so many opportunities for me to grow not only my real estate business, but in my other businesses as well. So coming to the end of December 2022, I took a week-long trip down to Charlotte and really saw what all Charlotte had to offer, doing more boots on the ground research strictly as a business trip, not so much a vacation this time. I connected with as many people as I could. I was out every night meeting new groups of people. I played some volleyball. As I played volleyball, I met a couple running groups, one that I go to every single time I'm down there now, and just talk to everybody about what I'm doing. Something very important when you're trying to learn a new market. Through all of 2023, I dug into the Charlotte market hard. I was looking at properties that my realtor set up for me in my buy box every single morning just to see what was hitting the market. And, well, seeing the common trends of what was going on in the Charlotte market. This wasn't I like Charlotte and I went down and bought a house deal. I spent a year and a half really researching this market hard to make sure I was buying the right property in the right area for what I'm trying to do. So after multiple conversations with my realtor and checking into multiple properties throughout the year, not quite seeing what I was looking for, late in the summer, early fall, I started seeing some price drops, some days on the market getting a little higher than they used to be, and multiple different things in the description to try to sell these properties quicker. So what led me to offering on this property and seeing something that wasn't in most other descriptions on-market properties. If you look what's on the screen right now, investor cash flow opportunity. Well, depends what you're trying to do. Wow, this is the exception you'll have when you tour this property. Blah, 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 blah. It was in one of my target areas that I was looking that I did see new properties being built. The very last line in this property overview, owner financing may be available. So this really jumped out at me, and that is what made me put my first offer in on this property. Over, I would say, the last 5 years, I've studied all these different creative financing strategies and getting little to no money into deals, buying a house, whether it's to flip or rentals. And realistically, it did take all I had to pull off this deal. I've even been in a paid mentorship group starting back in May that without some of the people in this group, there is no chance I would have closed on this property. This group that I am in really focuses on joint venturing, short-term PLM loans, and helping like wholesalers and contractors out. Now this program is called Gator Lending. More about that later. So after a few back and forth offers, I got my offer accepted. There was a couple other offers on the property, and we're going to go through step by step on how that really came to be and how my offer was the one that they decided to go with. Side note, if you do not understand creative finance in today's market, I promise you, you will be left in the dust. Or I'll just take all the deals that you think aren't deals. So this house hit the market 8/19/2023. Initial list price $495,000. 8/22/2023 price drop down to $485,000. It's a pretty quick price drop, right? 4 days later, dropped to $479,900, and then to the price drop where I made my offer. 8/30/2023, it dropped to $469,900. And this sparked not only my interest, but multiple other people's interest, apparently, as they had 3 other offers on this property. I've already had multiple different offers in mind if this first one didn't go through, with different percentages of seller financing and different purchase prices, trying to figure out what was most important to the seller, since, well, when you're on market, you don't usually get to talk directly to the seller. Also, I did put this property under contract sight unseen. And yes, that was in the contract that they accepted. Sent in my pre-approval letter, sent in my proof of funds. That came from my buddy Jake in the Gator community. Honestly, without him and his team, this really wouldn't have happened. He also convinced me that I could pull off this deal on my own rather than having to partner with him. So what did we settle at? 3 other offers. Mine was accepted. $450,000. 30% seller financing at 0% for 5 years, amortized over 30 years. instead of having divided into 5 years of monthly payments. So yes, I'm going to have a big chunk of money due at the end of the 5 years. In addition, the seller did agree to give me $25,000 in additional seller financing for repairs, closing costs, holding costs, whatever I deem necessary. And that was agreed upon at a 3% interest rate. In addition, the seller did agree to pay $4,000 towards seller concessions, which are going to come off of my closing costs. Now, in North Carolina, it's a little bit different than in Ohio, where I'm from. You usually have to put down due diligence and earnest money. Due diligence goes right to the seller. Whether you buy that house or not, whether you say you don't want it anymore during your inspection period, that money is gone no matter what. Non-refundable. They wanted $3,000. We got them down to $750 due diligence and $2,500 in earnest money, EMD. That's the money that's like good faith money that you put up saying, I'm serious about buying this house. And if for some reason I decide to not buy it and it's past my inspection period, that money is theirs too. Now, if I go through all my inspections and I decide this house isn't for me, I could get that earnest money back. Now, it is very important that you cancel within your inspection period or that earnest money is gone. So the clock's ticking. So I have a 14-day inspection period where I have to get my inspection done, get my contractors in there to give me quotes, get my appraisal done, and well, we're hoping title comes back so I can see if there's clear title on this property. No, all this that we just talked about is going to be very important later in this video. Believe me, you're going to want to stick around. This one might take a little bit, but it is well worth it. And I'm putting things in this video that you do not see in any other seller financing or seller carryback video. Little things that you might run into that are just missed in any single video that I've watched, and I've watched darn near every single one of them. The seller did have a stipulation when accepting this contract, and that was I had to use their closing attorney that they work with down in North Carolina. I would normally prefer to use my title company or closing attorney. Some states you close with an attorney, like in North Carolina. First target point that you really want to look at doing, whether you're sending money for a seller carryback, earnest money, or anything that you're sending to title or an attorney, when you are sending EMD, make sure to call the title company or attorney, research that office, make sure it's legitimate, and explain what deal you are doing and make sure they understand the process of what's going on. Some title companies or attorneys are not creative finance friendly. Only after this is very clear and they understand and confirm that this is legit and okay, that you can send funds over to them. Please, please, please do not just go and take the wiring instructions and send funds before talking to title. My original plan was to go to Jake and his team from the Gator community that I made a connection with and have them partner with me on this deal. I originally planned out, the way my numbers are written out for this deal, a 50-40-10 mortgage, something I have in my pocket from a DSCR lender that I have in one of my various networks. Now, what does that mean? A 50-40-10. Your 50%, that first 50, is what the seller of the property will receive when that property closes. Now, how do they get the rest of their money, right? That 40%, they are actually moving into second position on the property now instead of first position, and they're essentially turning into not the owner but the bank in position number 2. So now they're financing whatever our agreement was for 40% of the sale. So they're not getting all their money up front, and there's various reasons for that we will talk about shortly. And then that 10% plus closing costs, that has to be paid from me or a partner, and well, repairs or whatever else you need to put into the property. So, my original plan, that's what I was thinking to go with. I think I already said, Jake convinced me, pull this off yourself. Let's try to work this out and make it into a Morby Method, which I did have some experience in understanding, but wow, I will tell you, going through this process, there are so many things that I had no clue what I was doing, which, well, a transactional coordinator could have probably helped me get through some of these bumps. Starting with my lender, well, had to change my lender. Couldn't use who I wanted to use because that's not something that they really deal with. So this all led me to pulling off what I would consider the holy grail of creative finance, a seller carryback or Morby Method. This is something that not many people successfully pull off. So not that it was just me, but wow, I'm honestly extremely impressed that this went all the way through. So target point number 2 that most seller carryback videos do not tell you. Pick your lender wisely. If that lender does not understand the process and what you're trying to do, you're going to screw some things up, likely right from the start, and it's going to be a dead deal right there. The wrong words to the wrong person in this transaction will kill the deal. Third target point that videos don't teach you: filling out the initial contract. Don't put anything about seller financing in that contract. You need to have a completely separate contract. Think of it this way: you have an A-B contract for you and the bank, your first position lender. And then you have a B-C contract that's going to take into effect after you close on that contract for the seller financing portion or seller carryback portion. So we start this process that seems so freaking easy the way some YouTube videos make it sound like, until you go through and realize that like 90+% of these deals just never come to fruition. I don't have the exact numbers on that. That's just about what I hear floating around in the industry. I am going to post a video in the description of this video explaining what a seller carryback or Morby method is from Pace Morby himself, who is pretty much the king of creative finance. But quickly, a Morby method is when the seller either owns the property outright or has a lot of equity and is willing to finance part of that property. That moves them into second position lien on the property. They don't take all the money up front, and they do this for pretty much two big reasons. There's so many reasons why they do this, but I would say the biggest two is deferring taxes. When they have a lot of money that they're making in profit on this rental, that's going to bump them to the highest tax bracket. So by pushing a good portion of those taxes down the road, they're not bumped to that highest tax bracket, and they have some money coming in slowly, but also aren't going to be taxed as much. Number two, usually when sellers do work out a seller financing deal with a buyer, they get a little bit higher purchase price. Mainly because, well, if you're a good buyer on an investment property, terms are way more important than price. So if it works for both sides, where they're getting their side, they're getting a higher price and deferred taxes, among other things, and hey, I'm getting a combined lower interest rate if you work out the numbers right. Now remember, that was a quick explanation. There's so much more to that, but I cannot explain every little part in this video, or this video is going to be longer than a movie. So realistically, you really need to find what is the seller's motivation to sell. What do they need? What is important to them? And this was very hard in this deal, since I'm not only working with an agent on my side, an agent on their side. Finding out when I bought this property, you see it has a warranty deed on it for X number of dollars. Digging into it, the seller of the property that put this on market is actually a wholesaler. He's not even the owner of the property, which is legal, but it does make it very difficult to find out what the owner really wants. If you don't know what wholesaling is, again, look that up. I'm not going to cover that in this video. So now I have the property under contract, right? And I'm in full swing, my busy season of my other business, which is mobile axe throwing. Yes, throwing axes. I do that too. Labor Day weekend, I have packed jammed events. My last event ending Labor Day, Monday night, getting back home about 9:45 p.m. So I shower up and hit the road at 10:15 to drive down to Charlotte, as flights were like $700+ round trip. Then I'd have to rent a car, and well, hotel either way was going to have to pay for that. So drove through the night to get down there Tuesday morning to meet my inspector and really dig into this property I bought, so I know what the heck I'm buying, because remember, I haven't seen it yet. And what never fails when you look at a property listed, there's so many things that, of course, they don't disclose that you find when you see it in person. We had some mold issues, and by some, I mean it's going to be pretty expensive to fix. There is 2 furnaces in this property, as it could be split back into a duplex, so that's always a good backup plan. But one of the furnaces, and the bigger one, didn't work, so there's another $8,000+ out of my pocket. These are 2 big expenses that I did not work into my numbers. Everything else that I found was within reason of what I expected to pay and budgeted for. So let's backtrack for a second though, and show you what the heck I bought and why I bought it. You know the strategy that I'm approaching with this property. As listed, this is a 4-bedroom, 5-bath with 2 kitchens, 3,370 square feet. I had this plan, but after seeing this in person, it was even better than I thought. The plan to make it a 6-bed, 5-bath and rent out room by room, which is a lot more popular in Charlotte than it is around here in Cleveland, as it is a younger population and a lot more expensive to live. This property also had 3 separate entrances, 2 of which have their own separate entrance that you really only have to go to the common areas if you want to use them. Other than that, you don't have to see anyone else in the house. It's practically an apartment. And the one has 2 rooms with a huge walk-in closet. It's really just a 1-bedroom apartment. 2 upstairs rooms have a private bath, and the 2 smaller rooms do have to share a bath, but those are priced a lot lower in rent. I am using this company called Alcove. They deal with tenant side of the room-by-room rent. I deal with the property itself, any repairs needing to be done. This should rent for $6,200 a month gross is what they projected, and tack on an extra $100 per month for each tenant for utilities. So that's not out of my pocket. The utilities are in my name, but that is coming in addition to that $6,200. I will have to furnish all the common areas and supply Wi-Fi. That's not part of utilities. Plan number 2, if this doesn't work, I wall off 1 door and turn it into a 2-1 and a 4-4. 2-bed, 1 bath, 4-bed, 4-bath, which I won't gross as much, but it will be a lot easy to run and more passive, and I'll lose about $1,200 a month after all expenses. Also, this property is zoned where I could Airbnb, so I don't count on that and really don't want to do an Airbnb there. And also, it's zoned where I can add an ADU, additional dwelling unit. You know, like a completely separate building off your house, just a little area. This one would be through a company called Boxable, who I invest in and have a Boxable pre-ordered. I sure would like to dump that on the back of this property I bought in North Carolina, rather than putting it up here. Rents are just so much higher down there, and it would make way more sense. Really, these Boxables are just like a little studio apartment, 360 square feet. But the way that they're set up, it looks pretty spacious. Now, when I did put this under contract, it was in one of my 4 target markets in Charlotte. These little circles that I had that I'm like, 4 different strategies and reasons that make it a good place to buy. It was definitely an up-and-coming area. Now, yes, usually when you see that in the description of a listing, it means you're in the ghetto or in a bad area. Let's be honest. But when I was down there in 2022, this area did have a lot of houses with the same exterior finishes and a lot of work being done on those. So logically, I'm thinking it's probably all bought by the same investment company, which it is. And there was groundbreaking for new properties. So when I put this under contract and drove down in August, well, beginning of September, I was pleasantly surprised by seeing the 3 houses next door to me were all brand new. And more construction being done down the street. This is on a dead-end street. And right around the corner where I pulled in from, off the highway, there were 6 lots ground broke with utilities ran, so 6 brand new houses are going there, I'm assuming. Mind you, this is my thought process, seeing things in areas that are getting better. Now, a big thing in Charlotte, there are so many A-class, like high luxury apartments being built. And, well, they're not doing anything for the low to middle class. It's just not there. And realistically, building new, the money's really not there either. So I'm trying to hit this niche strategy. Tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think this room-by-room rent is going to really do well in Charlotte. Now, this area I bought in, it's a C-class area right now. And even with the new houses and all the refinishes on the current houses around it and apartments, I don't see that changing. I'm just hoping that the level of tenant quality gets a little bit better since the area is beginning to be more renovated and looking a lot nicer. It is within 10 minutes of downtown Charlotte and 10 minutes of the airport as well. So that's also very helpful. So tell me there's not an affordable housing problem without telling me there's not an affordable housing problem in Charlotte. Yeah, that's a joke. There is an affordable housing problem pretty much everywhere, but Charlotte is bad. So I'm in Charlotte for 1 day at this point. I'm getting all of my insurance to my lender and anything else they need. I'm meeting up with some people, and, well, I hit up a local run group that I met last time I was down there. This all on like 3 hours of sleep. No joke, I am dead to the earth. Slept really good that night and drove back home as I had an axe throwing event Wednesday evening. Next, the inspection came back pretty quick, and it did have pretty much everything on it that we talked about with the inspector when I was there. And, well, as I'm back home, my agent, who's a rock star, by the way, and helped so much through this whole process, went and met with various contractors throughout that time to get them in there and give me quotes. So I had a little bit of firing power when I go back to the seller and ask for a lesser price or better terms. I do highly recommend my agent if you are buying in the Charlotte area, especially if you're an investor, because he is an investor-friendly agent and he does put in the work. So we're waiting for the appraisal to come back. Everything else I have lined up, except for the appraisal, and title has not came back yet. So usually that comes back pretty quickly, and this time it just wasn't. So 2 days away from my due diligence period ending, I still don't have an appraisal. I still don't have clear title. So it's kind of hard to come back with another offer when you don't have those two things yet. Either way, I shoot over an offer 2 days before my inspection period, contingent on appraisal and title. 12 days in, title not coming back, in my opinion, is pretty ridiculous. With the quotes, inspection report, the issues that were not disclosed, I asked for a reduction to $440,000 and upping the seller financing to $50,000 for additional major repairs that was not accounted for. Two major things went into this renegotiation offer. One, everything I talked about to the owner, well, actually the seller, that I picked up on was that purchase price was more important to them than getting all the money up front. And for me, well, the lower barrier to entry while still hitting my target cash flow fully rented was my goal. Easily $20K more in repairs. Not something I wanted to eat out of pocket. So as you may be able to imagine, I was met with a very disgruntled response. Now, not in back and forth contracts, but for a day and a half now, we are negotiating back and forth. Just can't come to an agreement. We're close, but neither one of us wanted to budge more than, well, what we had set in our minds. Mine was, well, I had to hit my certain numbers and minimal cash out of my pocket to make this deal actually make sense for me. And the seller, well, the seller's always going to try to get the best deal for them. Only makes sense. We ended up having a Zoom call legitimately 2 hours before my due diligence period was up. And honestly, right when we got on that Zoom, the appraisal did come back. It did appraise for $450,000. So that was one big thing that was a relief and easier to talk about an agreement on this deal. Title still did not come back yet. So this Zoom went back and forth, and the wholesaler, not too friendly of a guy, the agent's just trying to keep peace. It did get a little heated, and we ended up not coming to agreement. I walked from this deal at this point. The wholesaler was having issues with me saying I should have seen these things before offering on the property. I also came back with, I put this property under contract sight unseen, which said that in the contract, and you knew when accepting my offer. He still was not happy with that response. And telling me, well, my HVAC quote was way too high, and the mold issues were not as big of a problem as I was saying they were. And I'm thinking, well, people are going to be living in this property. Mold is a big issue. I'm not trying to get sued. So I come back, and this is where we almost had a deal, but I kind of called his bluff. He's telling me my HVAC quote was too high. I said, okay, well, if you want to go in there and fix the unit, go for it. Replace it for me. Do it cheaper than I can, but I'm going to have my inspector come in and make sure it's done to code. He wasn't having it. So that didn't happen, and the deal goes back on the market. Come the next day when I'm calling the attorney, mutual party, find out title did not come back clear. There was $180,000 of judgments against the owner of the property. And also, as North Carolina is a mutual release state, as far as your earnest money goes, meaning both parties have to agree to release the earnest money, the seller decided he was not going to agree to release my earnest money, saying that we didn't put the proper contracts in time, in order to get my earnest money back. Either way, whether he was right or I was right, that's going to get held up and have to go to court. Not for me to decide, but it's going to be held for 90 days. We'll talk more about that when I get my realtor on a Zoom, because that was just a mess. Property goes back on the market 9/21/23. They listed it at $450,000. That's where our purchase price was agreed on before. It sits on the market for only 4 days, and the seller's agent comes back and says, if your buyer is still interested, could he put in another offer? Well, after having to disclose mold issues, a $180,000 judgment against the owner, and a non-working HVAC unit, those were things that were not disclosed before, and it looked like they didn't have any buyers at the price they were looking to sell anymore. So, on my end, I'm looking at, we have a lot more issues than I thought before, and obviously this seller wants to sell pretty darn quick, or they wouldn't have came and reached out to me after only 4 days. Mind you, original closing date September 30th. When I decide, hey, let's put a new offer in, I did push for a little more than I did before. I asked for $450,000, $50,000 seller financing on top of that 30% they were financing, and I asked for it at 0%. Same terms, 5-year balloon, amortized over 30 years. So after a lot of back and forth, and this was really weird because we never even wrote contracts back and forth, it was just all verbal. We got in another Zoom, that got heated, the seller decided to get off of it and just hung up. But we did get a signed agreement. I honestly think that this was a very odd process at this point, but I'm back under contract, and that's after talking to my lender and seeing if he thinks that that was doable or not. we're at $450,000, $40,000 of additional seller financing, $4,000 seller concessions, and still that 30% in additional seller financing as well. So the loan looks like this. 70% DSCR lender, first position. Seller moves into second position, is now the second position bank on this property, and he is seller financing $175,000 to me, meaning that's more than the property is actually worth according to the appraisal. Believe me, you're going to want to stick around because I still don't even believe how some of this stuff actually ended up working out. Next, we really start running into problems on my end now with my lender. Definitely a little disorganized, still feeling out what's going on in their business as they do have kind of a small team. And well, the seller obviously wants to sell this property quick. He's wholesaling it. I'm sure he has an agreement with the owner on when he said this property would be sold by. Which brings me to target point number 4 that you really need to focus on. If you're not great at this, use a transactional coordinator that understands this process. They could have seen many of these problems come way before they did and get on top of them, moving this deal quickly and talking to the right people and pushing the right people to get what is needed done in a more timely manner. Also, you need to use transactional lending when closing out this transaction. We'll get to that a little bit later. Next, so that I can do everything possible so that I'm not the one holding this deal up, I'm getting on the phone and emailing with my transactional lender that is bringing the 30% down payment plus the closing costs to the table for me. I'm borrowing money for legitimately less than a day just to close this deal out. When you're doing a seller carryback, this is necessary because when you close that first loan, exactly why the seller financing couldn't be on the initial sales contract, you have to actually close that loan in full, meaning 100% plus closing costs have to be in escrow. That's your A to B contract. Your B to C contract with the seller financing kicks in legitimately any time after you close that first contract out. Wait, so what is transactional lending? In this case, like I said, the first position lender wants 100% of that deal to be closed out. The whole $450,000 needs to be in escrow plus closing costs. And with me, for my lender, I'm required to have 5% in reserves. That's over that 30% plus closing costs. So I would then bring a JV partner to the deal or a transactional lender, or just for that big chunk of money for a very small amount of time. And they collect a fee on that. That's a whole different business model. And guess what? My transactional lender, and probably every transactional lender does, they call title just like I told you to do earlier in the video before sending money to title or the attorneys. They want to make sure they understand the process of what's going on, and they want in email stating from the attorney that they will not release that EMD to anyone other than them. That money is coming back to them. So that money cannot leave escrow. That's a huge part about their business to protect themselves. And then we hit another snag. I didn't know this, and it's something that transactional coordinator could have helped me with. I'm putting this property in an LLC which is layered, meaning I have a holding company up here, and the LLC I was putting the property in is down here. So this LLC is owned by this LLC. That's for anonymity purposes, protecting me and keeping my name off of it. But the lenders don't really like that much. So they dig into it a little bit more in underwriting. There were various issues that I could have solved, but it's outside of my transactional lender's business model to do some of these. Like, they wanted my transactional lender to be 51% owners of my company, my LLC the property was going in. And they were not willing to do things like that. So now I'm in a heck of a pickle, right? So my lender comes back to me and says, hey, if we close in your personal name, we could seriously speed this process up by 2+ weeks. And, well, I mean, closing in my LLC, it may have not closed. So as much as I didn't want to, and I will have to deed that property over, I decided to go forward with a deal, and this deal still made sense and was worth it. Next, after back and forth with my transactional lender, we did realize my transactional lender could not lend on this. It is outside their business model. They're a great transactional lender and very, very affordable. Somebody in my Gator community that I have access to and can hook you up with too if you need a transactional lender. So let me know. Guarantee you we're going to beat most people's rates. But if you need that transactional lender to do anything more than send money into escrow and get it back, it's not really going to work out too well for you. In the meantime, I'm filing extension after extension after extension because, well, this deal's not closing and we need to keep extending past the contract date. Seller, of course, is getting pretty irritated. Can't blame him at this point. I'm getting irritated too. And I promise you, I'm missing so many little details in this transaction, but again, this video would be longer than a movie if I went through every single little thing that happened in this over the 3 months it took to close. I mean, at this point, you would probably already know if you've done some deals. I'm way past my due diligence period. If I don't close on this, I am out my inspection money, I am out my appraisal money, I am out all the time I spent on this. I am out any other additional inspections that I paid for. It totaled almost to $4,800 at this point if I didn't close on this deal. So I'm pressing pretty hard as I know it's a good deal. And, well, I didn't want to waste all this time and nearly $5,000. So we're like a month past the initial closing of 10/12/2023. So after jumping through all these hoops with my lender and what underwriting wanted from me, promising over and over, this is the last thing we need from you. It wasn't for very many things, but we still got this closed. So let's continue. I looked back at possibly doing a loan sponsorship since my transactional lender couldn't lend on this, and probably most other transactional lenders wouldn't either. But at this point, it just didn't make sense for me, as I was going to have to give up 50% of the equity and cash flow of this deal, and I put this whole deal together for them to seriously just sponsor this loan. It really didn't make sense in my eyes, so that wasn't an option. Luckily, what was my saving grace, and this is kind of getting a creative deal done within a creative deal, but my lender says, hey, what if you got someone in your family or very close friend to gift you the money? And I'm like, so somebody's just going to give me money to close on this property? And he's like, well, yes, in the eyes of the underwriter, but you can have a B2C contract with them too, stating that they're going to give you this much money for the property plus this fee, and they're essentially going to be your transactional lender. The difference is they have to sign a note that says that they do not expect to be repaid for this money. That's what the lender sees. You and whoever is lending the money has a completely different contract. You know, the B2C contract. So I have a family member who, well, you know who you are. I just don't want to say and out them and say, hey, look, they have a lot of money. But they did save me. They seriously, without this money, I wouldn't have closed on this deal. They lent me $68,000. It was only supposed to be for a couple days, but we'll tell you why it wasn't a couple days. And instead of paying them our agreed upon rate of $2,000 flat fee for borrowing the $60,000 for 2 days, I end up paying them $2,500. Wait, there's still more. I'm still short money. I have some of the funds, plus these funds coming in, but 30% of the purchase price of the property is $135,000. And I need about $30,000 for closing costs. And I still need $45,000 in reserves after that money's sent to escrow. So we're looking at quite a big chunk of money, even after I borrow $68,000. Luckily, one thing happened because this deal took so long. One of my private money loans that I had out came back. So I lent out $27,000 and I got a return, and my gross amount coming back was $36,600. But that money needed to be used for this deal now. I have $68,000 from family to my business account that I wanted to close in, but I have to now close in my personal name. So I needed a letter from a CPA stating that borrowing these funds from my business will not affect my business operations. It's pretty much just a feel-good letter that the CPA writes that really doesn't mean all that much, but some lenders want it. I really didn't know or wasn't expecting, but that one wasn't too hard to get done. So since I'm short money, where am I going to get it from? Crap. Well, we're going to get even more creative within being creative in this creative financing deal. My lender says, hey, we could actually lend you up to 80% LTV on the property, loan to value. So he has to get that loan unlocked from underwriting, pull it back, and for seriously 1/8 of a point more, I can borrow 10% more money. So good. We're all fine. We think everything's going well. I'm borrowing 80%. I still now actually got more seller financing essentially at 0% because I have a little bit more money to play with to make sure this property goes the way it's supposed to. And now I'm only coming up with $109,000 to close between my 20% down, my closing costs, and then I still have to have $45,000 in reserves, just a lender requirement. Now at this point, we are about 2 weeks from when I close on this property, but the seller doesn't want to extend anymore. So that's kind of a problem, right? Like, they could drop and not file any extension at any point. So I need to give the seller more due diligence in order to keep this deal going. So for 1 week, I paid $1,000 of due diligence. That money's gone if this doesn't close. So I had a hard call with my lender to make sure that he truly thinks we can close on this property, because at this point, I'm second guessing it. 1 week later, another call with my lender. Hey man, is this really going to close? Because I'm just throwing away money at this point if not. So can you be honest with me? And at this point, the seller, obviously, like I said, is pretty irate. He tracks down my lender's supervisor and calls them. And then sends me that number and said, hey, you better call this guy and find out what's going on, since you're having issues getting a hold of your lender. And he's kind of went MIA for a little bit, which happened multiple times during this deal. But I get on the phone, call him. Just so happens one digit was off of that phone number that was sent to me, and I call a guy, and he starts messing with me. At first, I'm in the mindset of like, I need to find out what's going on. He's like, oh yeah, your lender quit. He left his clothes on the desk and left a note saying I went and joined a nudist colony. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And after a second or two, when I kind of calmed down, I'm like, this guy's just messing with me. This isn't the right number. Yeah, I can't make this stuff up, right? So I get a hold of his manager and am told, yeah, I'm very aware of what's going on with your loan. And I'm thinking, why is he talking to me like this? Like, you guys are holding this up and not giving me anything to go back to the seller with to say, hey, this is what's going on and this is what we need to close on this property. Seems like you sent faulty bank statements in. Yeah, fraudulent bank statements. And I'm like, well, I don't think so. So can you send whatever you think I sent to you? He emails them over to me. Those aren't my bank statements. That's not what I sent to you. That's not what my transactional lender sent to you. So why is this happening? This is what he also told to the seller. So the seller's thinking that I'm just messing with him at this point and trying to push a deal through that I can't get closed. Comes back and I'm like, these are the statements that I sent you. Emailed him over. And then he calls me and says, oh, we were looking at the wrong file. I can only speculate, but I'm thinking those statements might have ended up going to underwriting. That weren't mine, and that's what's causing a lot of these issues on underwriting really digging into my deal. Like I said, nobody admitted to that, and I don't know that for sure. That's just my speculation. But at this point, we're not even worried about that because I'm using gift money, and this is probably why I had to use gift money and not my transactional lender. So we get to November 15th. This is 2 days before the second week when I'm paying $100 a day to keep this deal going. Everything should be good, right? Nothing else is going to happen. I get a call saying, hey, we're really working on this. After I'm like, why is underwriting taking forever? It's been over a week. My ratios were off. Well, Paul, what are ratios, right? They're looking at what you're projecting to bring in rent and the cost of your debt on the property, and that has to be 1.5 more. So like 50% more than your debt is what they want to see you making in order to loan. Well, when I bumped up to 80% LTV, that threw that all off. Then I find out, because of North Carolina law, they can't charge me the points required to drop my rate low enough in order to make this happen, to get my ratios where they needed to be. Luckily, they did the right thing, and they did drop that rate, and we're good to close, right? That's the last thing. There's no way we have anything else. In that day, we also find out that the lender requires the owner of the property to be the one deeding and selling it. They don't want to see that wholesaler in the middle. And I'm like, really, you couldn't have told me that more than 2 days before closing? Like, that's something that just came up now that we didn't know about? So, of course, I'm not happy about that either, but the seller's like, I know, this is my deal. I'm the assignee of this deal. I'm supposed to sell it. It's completely legal in North Carolina. Back and forth and back and forth. Lender's not going to budge. Underwriting says this is a requirement to close. Me and the seller are thinking, do you guys even want to lend to me? Like, are you guys just yanking my chain at this point? Either way, seller deeds the property back to the owner, and the last hoop we have to jump through to close, right? Okay, good. I am driving through the night again down to North Carolina to close on this property Friday morning, November 17th. Well, I'm going down, I'm seeing multiple text messages coming in from my realtor and the wholesaler and the seller's agent saying that I did not send my $100 due diligence for today. And I'm saying, you might want to go back and look through that because I actually did pay all the way up to Friday. And they were trying to say I only paid till Thursday. Either way, that got washed out. That wasn't a big deal. Didn't pay that $100 that he still claims he thinks that he's owed. So I get down there all the way to North Carolina about 2 hours early. Pretty happy with that. Took a nap on the way down just to make sure that I made it there because I was pretty tired. And sitting in a parking lot waiting for my attorney's office to open. Go to leave about 5 minutes away from my attorney's, and my ignition, I put my key in and it wouldn't turn. My wheels locked up. I could not get my freaking car to start. So I call Subaru support, which is like AAA. They tell me they're about 40 to 80 minutes from being there. And I'm like, crap, I got to be at the attorney's in 25 minutes. So I call the attorney. I said, hey, what do you think about doing a back of the car closing? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I can't move my car. I got AAA coming out to check it out, but I'm stuck here. I'm 5 minutes away from you. Can you print out the documents? Can we close here? I was in a hotel parking lot, walked into the hotel, and I'm like, is there any way we could just use your lobby? Because I told them the whole story, and they're like, yeah, come on in. I walked back out, and seriously, 10 minutes, the Subaru support team was already there, which was awesome. And now I know how to fix that problem if it does happen again, but they did have to take part of my steering column in order to do so, and like flip this switch. Anyways, that's nothing to do with the deal, but just, can something go right in this freaking deal? So I call my attorney as she's about to walk out the door and say, hey, I'm on my way. We're good. Get there. First thing she says after introducing herself is, your wire didn't go through. I'm like, really? I sent it yesterday. My wire sent from my family member came in this morning, and the lender's wire came in. We were just waiting on mine. Took an hour and a half on hold with Bluevine, my business checking account, and they couldn't figure out why the heck this wire wasn't gone through yet. Excuse after excuse, on hold, back and forth. Hour and 10 minutes in, hour and 20 minutes in, my wire does go through. We already signed all the paperwork. We're just waiting for the wire now. And in the meantime, the owner of the property actually comes in too. So I have to have a face-to-face with the owner after this long, drawn-out process, which was a little awkward, but wasn't as bad as I thought. Wire comes through. I'm still on hold. The customer support answers the phone and says, I don't know what's going on. We're still working on your process. I said, hey, the wire went through 10 minutes ago. He's like, oh, it did? I'm like, how do you not know the wire went through on the very problem you've been dealing with for an hour and a half? Either way, let's just say I'm looking for a new business checking account. So after talking to the owner of the property for a little bit that was selling it to me, he goes on to say he's absolutely amazed about the deal that we just put together because he's never even thought about doing something like that and didn't even know it was possible. So the seller carryback or Morby Method is pretty rare. Not many people pull it off. But I see a lot more about why he sold me the property, even though I've never actually talked to the owner of the property this entire transaction. This guy's in his late 80s, maybe early 90s. Can't see well, had to have somebody read everything he was signing for him. I think he's just done in real estate. Like, he can't keep up with properties anymore. But he's still willing to push a little bit of that down the road because he doesn't need all that money up front and save some money on taxes. Now he's got a $486 payment come in every single month for the next 5 years. And who knows, he has more properties and he might end up selling me something else if the numbers work out. So we're closed. Finally, I really, truly have ownership of this property now. Like, that was just the biggest relief right there. And before walking out the door, I got a $175,000 check cut to me. Which, honestly, I mean, I've never had a $175,000 check cut to me at any point. Even though some of that money was mine already. And some of that money I had to send back to my family. Still, it's pretty cool. So even after that, I have $55,500 for repairs and holding costs for this property. And now we're going to get into why I had to pay my transactional lender or my gift money person a little extra money. I go to cash this check, and well, I get a 14-day hold put on this check because, well, I mean, I don't think I've ever cashed a check that big before, and I didn't have $175,000 laying in my bank account, so they put a 14-day hold, which I thought was a little excessive. But what can I do? Turns out, 10 days later, it actually goes through, and it's not held anymore, and I'm able to pay my transactional lender back. So, still 10 days when they thought they were only lending money for 2, maybe 3 days. And then somewhere between the drive to North Carolina or the drive to my rental property after closing, I'm not quite sure when it happened, I pull into my new rental, and I'm missing a hubcap. Just came in the mail today. But yeah, I had to order another hubcap. This cheap piece of plastic cost me $80-something. It's kind of ridiculous. But now we are on to starting the rehab process. And I successfully did pull off a seller carryback or Morby Method, which honestly is still amazes me to this point. And there's no freaking way I couldn't have done this without my awesome realtor I have built and grown with in the Gator community. So, since I'm making this video now, let's start running through the beginning of the rehab and how this actually went a lot more smooth to this point than buying the property. Luckily, I needed something to go right? Anyways, Friday I get my internet. I had to go pick up all the internet equipment, and I tried to do a self hookup. That didn't work, but they were out there the next day hooking it up for me because, well, I didn't have wires. Somebody cut the wires to the Spectrum cord, so they had to rerun all that. So internet's hooked up Saturday. Between Saturday and Sunday, I had all of my common areas furnished. All my appliances in there, all my furniture, And it was all delivered minus one thing I had to pick up from Facebook Marketplace. So that was a weekend success. Monday, I have multiple different contractors come in between my handyman doing all my odds and ends stuff, one HVAC guy, one mold guy, and getting some quotes in. And oh yeah, I have my tree service person come in and deal with all the trees that needed to be cut down. Tuesday, I make some videos on the house, getting some information to Elko to get my property listed. Have a couple more contractors come in, and it rained all day. I was supposed to have my roof done, but because of the rain, we had to hold off on that. And I had yet another mold guy come out to give me a quote and kind of walk through what he thought needed to be done. I went with the second guy because the second guy seemed to be more straightforward with me. And the day before Thanksgiving, this is damn driving back up to Ohio, I get a few last minute things done in the morning. I have my ADT security hooked up, which took a few hours, but now I have security system on my house. And my last HVAC guy comes in to give me a quote. He kind of gave me a soft quote already, but he needed to see the actual units and see what he was working with. And, well, that's actually done now. I got that done just this week. So to this point, roof done, HVAC done, tree service cut. And this week, I'm actually getting all of my odds and ends handyman stuff done, the mold issue dealt with, and I should actually have this property ready to rent by the week of the 18th, but just in case, I do have it listed for January 1st. I have a couple applicants that came in so far, but nothing that I really thought was approvable. But I'm trying to fill this up for January 1st. So that's the goal. Getting a couple of these units rented out for the beginning of the year. And if I do have everything done early, I can always bump up the availability date. So, quick numbers. Fully rented. This place between $5,800 to $6,200 a month. Debt service $486.12 for my private money loan. That starts January 1st, and also January 1st starts my DSCR loan at $2,467.06 a month. Add $303.49 for taxes and insurance, and $59.99 for cable. And remember that $600 is coming in fully rented for utilities every month from my tenants, so I don't have to account for that. Or so conservatively say that I am pulling in $5,790 every month fully rented, which I do have rents a little bit lower than projections to try to get this rented out quicker. And that nets me $2,464.34 a month. Now, yes, there's going to be repairs, things go wrong, vacancies, but I'm pretty happy with that spread. The room rentals. And there's also just going to be more issues with room-by-room rentals, as this is, I would say, a lower income class of people than... And there's just going to always be more problems. I've dealt with this for 5 to 7 years now. I've kind of understood how this works. But my goal, honestly, is only to pull $400 out of this property every month for my living expenses, and that's fine with me. Everything else is going to go into just reserves for the property and kind of build up my war chest to pay off my private money lender 5 years down the road. So now, if everything goes to plan, I should, even after holding costs and repairs, make about $17,500 buying this property. So in a perfect world, putting $2,000 a month into my reserves for this property, after 5 years, adding to that $17,500 that hopefully will be extra money left over from the deal just to throw into my reserves, or I should have saved $137,500. Now, let's be real. Things are going to break in 5 years. I'm going to have to do I'm going to have to do capital expenditures, upgrading some things, and, well, I'm going to have some vacancies. So I'm not really expecting that number to be in my account in 5 years. But 5 years down the road, I have to pay that balloon off, right? What's that going to look like? Well, I'm going to have $145,832.80 balloon payment that I have to pay in 5 years. Yikes. Whew. What am I going to do? What's my exit strategy, right? So exit strategy number one, the most common, and it could or couldn't work depending on where the market is at the time. I refi into another 30-year mortgage. Hopefully a little bit of appreciation and, well, principal pay down. And also granted that rates are lower than where they are today, so it actually makes sense to refinance into another 30-year mortgage. Well, option one doesn't always work out, so what's my second option? I go back to the owner and say, hey, Mr. Owner, I've paid you for 5 years straight now, never missed a payment, was never late. Is there any chance you want to extend this loan? Now, I'm not expecting him to extend at 0%, but maybe if I throw him a decent interest rate like 5 or 6%, maybe he will extend and we'll just keep making payments, and now I have interest payment that's added on top of that. But now I have a property that's actually generating me cash flow, and I'm not just burning holding costs. So it's a little bit more doable at that point, just eating up a little bit more cash flow. And there's kind of options inside options with option number two. this can go all different ways. Maybe he does want a good chunk of that. Maybe I have to pay half of it off, and then we'll just seller finance the second half of whatever I owe. So I could probably at this point easily pay off 50, 60, 70 grand if that's what he wanted, which is also saving him again. He takes a chunk, but not the whole chunk, and now he's not getting bumped up to a higher tax bracket. Maybe 1 or 2 brackets higher, but he's not going to that next bracket higher, saving himself in taxes again. And option 3, which I actually had the option to do this right from the get-go before I did so much of the work myself, is bring in a capital partner. But now, 5 years later, I have a fully operating rental property generating cash flow, and it's sustainable. So it's going to be a lot easier to find a good capital partner. That capital partner will come in and pay off whatever my seller financing debt is. Now, whatever that debt is, say, just for quick numbers, that debt is 30% of the value of the property. So they're buying essentially 30% equity in the property. Well, I'm giving them 50% equity, so they actually just gained half the equity of the property by only paying for 30% of it. And I'm going to split cash flow 50-50 with them. So that's, a pretty good deal, and I'm pretty confident I'm going to have no problem finding somebody for that deal. Am I giving up more than I need to? Likely. Do I really want to go to option number 3? No, but if I need to, it's there, and I am 100% confident that I actually would have somebody today that would be willing to do that. So in 5 years, when the property's making money, worth more, let's just say I have more options. Now, if the property appreciates and rents raise, I'm obviously not going to give up 50% of the deal because I won't need to. I can offer something that's still very attractive at a better deal to me. And even if that does come to fruition where I do have to give up half of my property to pay off that seller financing agreement, 50% of a good deal is way better than 0% of a good deal, so I'm completely happy with that. So that's the deal in a really, really, really big nutshell, but it is. And let's see if I could pull off the strategy. Do you think it's going to work? I mean, I do, obviously, or I wouldn't have bought it, but there's a lot of moving parts, and I still have to make this thing work to my strategy. Closing the deal is only the first part. Well, stick around to hear more about how this turned out.